Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. We join you today from the picturesque Illinois River in far northeastern Oklahoma to talk about the educational efforts geared toward our state's poultry producers that are now seeing results, including improved water quality. The slow winding bends and peaceful waters of the Illinois River make it one of Oklahoma's most beautiful natural resources. But not long ago, this mecca to outdoor leisure was struggling to coexist with one of our state's biggest agricultural contributors, poultry. According to the USDA, broiler production contributes more than $700 million to the Oklahoma economy each year, behind only cattle and hogs.
But right now today we're in here with our baby chicks. They're 5 days old. We place the chicks, we set the house up kind of like what you see it here today, with feed trays along with the automatic feeders. We've got the nipple drinkers that provide water to the chicks. But we place the chicks in here at day one, the day they hatch, and they'll remain in here until they go to processing.
And that is where we come back to the river, because after the broilers leave, their waste litter is removed from the house and applied to agricultural land. Josh Payne is an OSU animal waste specialist. He says a lack of understanding of this fertilizer's components and its impact on the watershed contributed to nutrient problems downstream.
30 years ago, we as scientists and also the producers weren't as aware of phosphorus being a limiting nutrient and having concerns and issues with watersheds. So we tended to focus more of our attention on nitrogen management. Now that we've determined that phosphorus is more of a concern, the mindset of the producers and the industry has changed to help reduce the negative environmental impact and better manage this byproduct that is coming from the poultry industry.
10 years ago, most of the litter was just applied locally. We had a challenge in the watershed, and because of that, there's many different entities that work together, and poultry integrators as well as producers have worked together to focus on getting it put in the place that does the most good, sampling of the litter and sampling the soil and applying accordingly. It's even made our litter go farther because we're not over-applying as we once were.
In fact, to many, this byproduct has become an important moneymaker.
Approximately 90% of the poultry litter that's being produced in northeast Oklahoma watersheds like Uchee-Spavinal and the Illinois River watershed is actually being moved outside of the watershed to soils that are deficient in phosphorus, and they can actually use that. You would be surprised about 70% of the soils in Oklahoma are actually phosphorus deficient.
The litter has become a commodity that we're able to market and help improve our bottom line.
Back at the river, Josh Payne explains that this turnaround in Oklahoma's poultry industry is no accident. The changes are the result of regulation, research, and education.
What the state did was to pass some regulations to address proper management of manure when it's taken out of a poultry house and then land applied. As part of those regulations, Oklahoma State University Cooperative Extension Service was given the responsibility of educating producers on proper nutrient management, how to properly manage their manure for land application, base it on agronomic rates, looking at soil tests, looking at litter analysis, calibrating spreader trucks, etc. All this was given to Oklahoma State University, and the Cooperative Extension Service has actually been providing continual mandatory education for both poultry producers and poultry manure applicators for the past 15 years.
And now you're seeing some measurable impacts as a result of that consistent educational push?
Absolutely, and it's not something that we would expect to see overnight. This is going to take some time. It took some time for the water quality concerns to arise, and it's going to take some time to see these improvements, but fortunately we are starting to see some of those improvements now. For example, we're seeing phosphorus loading reductions in the Uchee-Spavinaw watershed of around 31%. This is in both Spavinaw Creek and in Beatty Creek. A recent research publication is showing that Illinois River phosphorus trends are actually reducing, so our water quality is improving.
We all want to, help preserve the environment for our future generations. I've got 3 young daughters that I want to leave, make sure that I do my part to leave the environment as good or better than we found it, so to speak.
One place you can learn more about this topic and what is being done to manage these resources is a poultry waste website Payne and his colleagues maintain.
It's loaded with fact sheets, regulatory information. All of this information is related to bettering poultry waste management. We also have an Oklahoma litter market website, and the idea behind that is to connect buyers and sellers and service providers of poultry litter.
You can find links to these sites at sunup.okstate.edu. Turning our attention now to Washington and the government shutdown. Joining us now is Larry Sanders, our ag policy specialist. And Larry, let's kind of start with some of the things that agriculture folks and people in rural Oklahoma might want to think about in terms of the shutdown.
Well, I think first of all, I just want to briefly say that there's a difference between being balanced and being objective. And I'm more concerned than I have been in a long time about what's happening with the economy because of the politics. And from an objective perspective, we've got some real issues here. Farmers are going to suffer, are suffering already because of this situation. If we get to the debt crisis and don't do anything about it, the whole economy and the global economy are going to be in peril. And there are issues beyond this narrow scope that are going to affect us adversely for a long time to come.
Regardless of political affiliation, everybody's talking about this, thinking about this, and what are some of the specifics that are going to be happening to farmers or already have?
Sure. Farmers and ranchers, landowners that are expecting checks aren't going to be getting them until those offices are able to reopen. If they need those checks from FSA or NRCS co-signed, there's not going to be anybody there to co-sign them. If they need federally supported loans, those aren't going to be available. They can be concerned about what's going to happen with interest rates, what their bankers are going to say about pending loans. There's going to be no immediate help from the normal programs because those people are out on the shutdown.
And in terms of the federal debt, where are we there if Congress doesn't act soon?
I think there's a big disconnect on understanding how the federal government works. And if we don't find a way to raise the debt ceiling within the next month, this is going to occur between mid-October and mid-November. The government is just simply not going to be able to pay its bills. So if you bought T-bills on a short-term basis and are expecting an interest payment, you're not going to get it. The government's going to have to decide whether they pay a Social Security check or a veteran's check or a soldier's check, and there isn't going to be any money there to do that. The government is going to be unable to function. That is going to have a ripple effect across our national economy. Markets are going to take a nosedive. The global economy, which considers the U.S. the leader in the world economy, is going to be adversely affected.
And what are some of the other larger impacts that you're keeping an eye on?
Well, we just are beginning to claw our way out of this economic meltdown, the worst recession we ever had in 2008 since the Great Depression. We're going to see the economy shrink. We're going to see more unemployment. So we're going to move from this 7% that we're at, perhaps back up around the 10% level relatively quickly. And rather than weeks or months for recovery, this is going to take years to get over. Interest rates are going to begin to go up. and there is no end in sight if we go over that cliff.
A lot of people are really frustrated right now. Also consumers, we haven't yet mentioned them. What are some of the concerns there?
Well, it's easy for many of us who are able to get up and have a full cupboard and refrigerator to not think about this. There's lots of marginal poor out there that rely on federal assistance in the short run, and you can agree or disagree on whether that's right, but those programs are beginning to shut down because they don't have the money to function, they don't have the people there to manage them. If we go through the longer term, some of the programs that they've tried to protect, like school lunch programs, breakfast for seniors, are going to be shut down. If you go beyond that, when you don't have the inspectors there to inspect the domestic food, when you don't have the inspectors to inspect what's coming in from foreign countries, going to be less safety there. And if we don't have farmers have operating loans to get the seed in the ground, next year we're going to see higher prices and food shortages.
Finally, a brief glimmer of hope, a little bit of positive news in terms of the Farm Bill, which we know is all kind of run parallel to the other things we've talked about.
It's outside this, but it's affected because Congress is so dysfunctional right now. The Senate had passed a Farm Bill months ago. They have been waiting with a conference committee from their side. The House finally decided to bring their food bill and their Farm Bill together again. Just within the last few weeks, and that's allowed the leadership to sit down and begin drawing up a list of conferees from the House side, and we are told today that they will be announcing that soon. So if they announce that, we'll see Congressman Lucas from our state and others sit down with the Senate. It's not going to be an easy discussion, and if they do find a way to come together on it, it's not going to be easy to get it through both the House and the Senate and get the president's signature. But we get the conference started, and there is a beginnings of hope for a new farm bill.
Okay, well, a little bit of good news there. Larry, thanks so much to you and your team for helping us sort this all out, and we'll hear from you again soon. Larry Sanders, our Ag Policy Specialist and longtime professor here at OSU.
Joining us now for the latest in the grain markets is Kim Anderson. Kim, the big news this week should be the WASDE report. Instead, it's the lack of the WASDE report. Talk to us through what's happening.
Well, because of the government shutdown, the USDA will not release the October WASDE report. They're going to indefinitely suspend that. Hopefully they'll release it a couple weeks afterwards. You'll recall that the market's been waiting on that report because it is the report that combines both the FSA crop insurance planted and harvested acres with USDA survey data. So it's a more accurate estimate of what corn, beans, and wheat harvested and planted acres actually were.
Okay, so without that, what does the market look to?
Well, what the market's going to look to is private sources for information. In this case, you've got Bloomberg and Reuters that always release what we call pre-release reports. And in this case, on corn production, it's 13.8 billion bushels. On soybean production, it's 13.15 billion bushels. With ending stocks for wheat, it's 519 million. That's slightly less than USDA's report in September. Corn at 1,920 million bushels, slightly higher than the September USDA report. And September ending stocks at 167 million bushels. Again, pretty close to where the USDA September report was.
So then from a producer standpoint, do you now adjust strategy with these different numbers and maybe not quite expecting the market to do some moving?
Well, I don't think you're going to adjust the strategies. Just dollar cost averaging, sell lots of, or a certain percentage of your product in storage over time. Sell some before the USDA comes back in and releases the report, and some afterwards.
All right, good information as always. Kim Anderson, Grain Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Hi, I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet weather report. The state's first air temperatures at or below 32 degrees came Sunday morning, October 6th. Kenton dropped to 27 degrees. Boise City bottomed out at 30, and Goodwell dropped to 32 degrees. For most of us, the recorded lows were in the 40s. A graph of Kenton air temperature and wind speed shows just how low the wind was near the ground. At times Sunday morning, 0. During the times the red graph of air temperature was below the blue freeze line, the wind stayed below 4 miles per hour. Kenton had clear skies at the same time, the ingredients for radiational cooling. Clouds hold the heat in, while clear skies let heat from the ground escape. Recent rains are giving planted wheat a good kickstart. Here's a photo from October 8th of rapidly growing wheat near Binger. The forest green color on a rainfall map from September 26th through October 9th shows that this field north of Binger had more than 2 inches of rain in the 2 weeks prior to this picture. Here's Gary with a look at drought improvements.
Thanks, Alan. Good morning, everybody. As usual, we're going to start with a look at the drought monitor, but we're going to go a little bit different this time. We're going to look at the positives, and the biggest positive is how much we've improved over a year. So let's start out with a look back in early October 2012, see where we were at that point. As you can see from this drought monitor from that period, about 100% of the state was covered in drought, and over 80% of the state was considered to be in extreme to exceptional categories. Those are the worst 2 categories of the drought monitor. Now we have had some pretty decent rainfall over that 1 year period. Most of that though has been since February. So let's take a look at the departure from normal rainfall map from the Mesonet since February 1st all the way through the end of September. And you can see much of the northern 2/3 of Oklahoma have had pretty decent rainfall from 110 to 120% of normal, or from 6 to 8 to even more than 12 inches above normal in some areas in central Oklahoma. Now that has made a significant difference in the latest drought monitor map compared to a year ago. You can see there are still areas with significant drought left in parts of the state, especially out in the Panhandle, and super especially down in southwestern Oklahoma, those areas in Tillman and Jackson counties and the surrounding areas. So that showed up on that departure from normal rainfall map. Those are the areas that didn't get the rainfall. Now let's take a look at the bigger picture, the entire United States, the change in the categories of the drought monitor over that year from October 2nd, 2012 through October 1st, 2013. You can see great improvements over a large area of the Great Plains, including and especially the northern 2/3 of Oklahoma. So great improvements over that year, what's considered the water year, October 1st to September 30th. That's what that rainfall will do for you if it's timed just perfectly. I understand some places still need lots of that rainfall, so hopefully over the next couple of months we'll continue to get rainfall, but especially for those areas out west and down in southwest. Maybe we can improve these maps a little bit more. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
The federal government shutdown has an impact on a lot of industries across the country, and livestock marketing is one of them. Daryl, how is it affecting what you do?
Well, a government shutdown has an initial impact on folks in the industry that use daily or weekly price reports, for example, to base business decisions, business transactions on. Obviously market analysts and folks watching the market generally begin to lose that day-to-day feel of what's going on in the market. The initial impacts for a few days are not all that great, other than those folks directly impacted by transactions. But it changes a lot over time.
Okay, let's say that it keeps going past 2-3 weeks, maybe a month.
The effects really grow not just linearly, but in an exponential sense as you go farther. Again, the impacts on a number of market institutions, for example, cash settled futures contracts like the feeder cattle contract, ultimately will not be able to terminate properly if a shutdown continues at the point where those contracts expire. Things like the cattle on feed report may be impacted because even though the shutdown may or may not be in effect when the report is scheduled to be released, it's based on surveys that were done normally at the time during the shutdown. So the impacts will really grow, and just generally the market gets farther and farther in the dark, if you will, about what the situation really is as time goes on. And so it becomes much more difficult and much more costly for firms to figure out where the market is if they don't have that information available.
If it goes too long, do they just write it off and put an asterisk for that month or however long they don't have the data, or do they go back and find the data?
It's going to depend on the particular data. Market data, a lot of it is fleeting. If you're not there in the auction, the day the auction happens, you're not going to ever get that data. If it's, NAS type statistical data, more than likely you'll make that up and get it eventually, but maybe not, depending on how long it lasts.
Okay, so you're not getting the U.S. data, but you're also seeing some Mexican data. Let's talk about that.
Well, one of the things that we get out of Mexico is an annual report on cattle exports to the U.S. Mexican cattle exports are reported on a September through August cycle, so it's like a crop year, if you will, that's not a calendar year. And that data was recently available, and it confirms what we've been suspecting in terms of the annual imports of cattle into the U.S. from Mexico this year. The Mexican data shows that for that 12-month period, it was about 800,000 head of cattle exported to the U.S. That's down 47% from the previous 12-month period in that data. And so again, it confirms what we've been anticipating as we finish out this calendar year in the U.S. We're looking at somewhere in that neighborhood of 800, maybe 850,000 head of annual imports, and that's a dramatic decrease from last year. It's one more lack of feeder cattle supplies, if you will, for the U.S.
How will that affect the U.S. market?
Well, again, the supplies are getting tighter, the cattle prices reflect that, and so as we go forward, those will become more and more apparent. Most of those Mexican cattle come in at very light weights. They go through a stocker phase before they would show up at a feedlot, and so as time goes on, feedlot placements will reflect that lack of Mexican cattle along with the other limitations of feeder cattle supplies in the U.S.
Okay, well hopefully next time we talk to you we have a little U.S. data to talk about. Darrell Pill, Livestock Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
We want to talk now about an upcoming Economic Outlook Conference with Damona Doi, our farm management specialist. And Damona, let's just start with a general overview of what people attending can expect.
Sure. During the conference, we'll have a series of keynote speakers along with some panels to focus on issues that we think are timely and important in agriculture and the rural economy in general. So the keynote speakers, one will be Joel Kotkin, who's actually an urban demographer from California, but he studied trends broadly.
And in addition to the keynote speaker, we're going to have some of the regular topics and looking ahead in terms of the economy and business.
Right. Yeah, one of the outcomes of the survey of last year's conference was an interest in learning more about water issues, and so we'll have a panel that features some Oklahoma experts.
And this is a day-long gathering of farmers and ranchers and people involved in ag business and ag lending?
Right. Now, whether you're a producer or someone in agribusiness or a government agency, we think there's going to be a lot of interesting information to give you food for thought as you make decisions, not only in the coming year, but also in the next couple of years. So there'll be an future outlook for decision making.
Okay, lots of important information. And then finally, the when and the where and how much it all costs.
The conference will be here in Stillwater at the Alumni Center, and we'll have a reception the evening before, so on October 31st. The conference itself will be on November 1st.
Okay, Damona Doi, our farm management specialist, thanks a lot. And if you're interested in attending the conference, we've got more information for you on our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Those Oklahoma producers that have spring calving cows that they're going to overwinter and try to have in good body condition for next spring when they calve might want to consider a management practice that could save a few dollars and some few hours of labor. Now, this management practice requires that we have adequate amounts of standing forage available for these cows to eat, or enough hay stored to where they have certainly an adequate amount of hay available at all times. What I'm talking about is what we call interval feeding of the protein supplement that goes along with that hay. An experiment was done back in the 1990s here at OSU, where they looked at feeding a high-protein supplement either 6 times during the course of a week or only 3 times in the course of a week. Both sets of cows got exactly the same amount of the protein supplement, but the difference was whether the cows were basically fed every other day or virtually every day. As they followed those cows on through the winter, what they found was that the weight loss of the cows after calving was virtually identical. There was only a 13-pound difference, and that's just a little small drink of water. The body condition score loss between those 2 sets of cows was virtually identical. And then when they looked at the rebreeding percentage for the following summer, again, no real difference. Only 4% difference. That's basically 1 cow in these 2 treatment groups. So what we've learned is that if we're putting out a small package of a high protein supplement, we can do that on an every other day basis rather than having to go out, spend the gasoline money, spend the hours taking that feed out to those cows every day and get the same kind of performance. In those situations where we don't have enough forage available and we're going to have to feed a larger amount of a high energy, low protein cube, then that's going to have to be fed every day just because of the volume of feed that's available to those cows. But if you're feeding that high protein supplement this winter, might consider this business of feeding it every other day, making sure that they still get the proper amount of protein supplement, but save those dollars in gasoline and those hours of labor. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime at sunup.okstate.edu. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. From the Illinois River, I'm Lyndall Stout. We'll see you next time at SUNUP.